There are moments when life looks stable from the outside, yet something inside you feels slightly dislocated, as if a quiet misalignment were spreading beneath the surface. You continue moving through the routine, handling responsibilities, managing deadlines, responding to expectations, but an unspoken tension follows you everywhere. It's not dramatic enough to collapse your world, yet strong enough to remind you that something deeper needs attention. The ancient Stoics understood this feeling well. They believed that true imbalance rarely starts in the external world. It begins in the mind, in the subtle chaos of thoughts that go unnoticed until they become heavy enough to shape the way you live. Trying to fix your life by adjusting only the external details rarely works. You can change your job, move to another city, organize your schedule, start a new routine, and still feel lost. This is because the external world reflects, rather than creates, your internal state. Real transformation happens when you address the foundation. The way you interpret experiences, the way you respond to challenges, and the way you speak to yourself when no one is watching. This video is about rebuilding that foundation. Today, you will learn 10 Stoic-inspired practices capable of reorganizing your inner world so that the outer one begins to fall into place. Practice 1. Regain control over your inner dialogue. Before you attempt to change habits, routines, or emotional reactions, you must first confront the force that shapes every experience you have: your internal commentary. Most people live with a mental voice that constantly pulls them away from clarity. This voice judges too quickly, anticipates problems that haven't happened, amplifies small mistakes, and interprets ordinary discomfort as personal failure. Because it has been with you for so long, it feels normal, but it is often the primary source of disorder in your emotional life. The Stoics taught that events themselves rarely disturb us. What truly affects us is the interpretation we attach to them. The same principle applies inwardly. When your thoughts are unexamined, they become commands rather than observations. A single anxious interpretation can influence your decisions for hours. A harsh sentence directed at yourself can drain all motivation from your day. A fear imagined in your mind can feel as real as a physical threat. That is why gaining authority over your inner dialogue is the first essential step toward rebuilding your life. This practice begins with awareness. Throughout your day, pay attention to the tone and direction of your thoughts, especially in moments of stress, disappointment, or self-doubt. Notice how quickly the mind shifts toward catastrophizing or self-criticism. Notice how easily it turns temporary problems into permanent identities. The simple act of noticing interrupts the automatic cycle. You begin to hear the thought as a thought, not as truth. Once awareness is established, the next step is correction. When your mind presents a distorted narrative, you challenge it. When it insists on a conclusion driven by fear, you question the evidence. When it frames you as weak or incapable, you respond with clarity instead of emotion. This does not mean forcing positivity or pretending everything is fine. The Stoics despised self-deception. It means choosing interpretations rooted in reason rather than impulse. You learn to separate what is happening from what your mind is adding to the moment. As you practice this consistently, your inner dialogue gradually transforms. The mental noise becomes less invasive. The dramatic interpretations lose intensity. Your thoughts start to cooperate with your goals instead of sabotaging them. You gain the ability to lead your mind instead of being led by it. And when this shift happens, your emotional life becomes more stable, your decisions become calmer, and your sense of direction grows stronger. Your life doesn't change when the world becomes easier. It changes when the voice inside you becomes wiser. That is the first practice. Reclaiming the authority over your inner narrative so you can rebuild everything else on solid ground. Before we continue, I want to ask you something small but meaningful. If this message is helping you reflect on your own life, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and comment something personal, something real, about a situation you want to change. Writing it is an act of commitment to yourself. Practice 2. Strengthen your body to stabilize your mind. Many people try to build a strong mind while inhabiting a weakened body. They want clarity without movement, resilience without discomfort, emotional strength without physical effort. But the ancient Stoics understood a truth that modern life has conveniently forgotten. The mind and the body are not separate realms, they mirror each other. A tired, neglected body produces a restless mind. A body that avoids all difficulty becomes a mind that collapses at the first sign of pressure. Your physical state influences your internal world more than you realize. When you are inactive, your thoughts become heavier, your emotions become more volatile, and your patience shortens. When you avoid physical challenge, your tolerance for discomfort diminishes. When you treat the body as an afterthought, the mind loses its anchor. The Stoics trained physically not for vanity, but for character. They believed the body was the first arena where discipline, courage, and endurance were forged. To strengthen your body in a Stoic way does not require extremes. It requires intention. It begins with movement. Simple, deliberate, consistent movement. A short walk in the morning, performed without distractions, reconnects you with presence. A brief session of exercise, even 10 focused minutes, awakens your internal power. Physical training becomes a reminder that effort does not break you, it builds you. Modern culture often promises comfort as the ultimate reward, but comfort is a dangerous teacher. When your days revolve around avoiding discomfort, your mind becomes fragile. It starts to perceive ordinary stress as unbearable. But when you regularly challenge your body, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. You stop fearing effort. You stop interpreting discomfort as danger. You begin to trust your capacity again. There is something profoundly grounding in choosing to move even when you don't feel like it. When you exercise in moments of low motivation, you send a message to your inner world. I am willing to do what is necessary, not only what is pleasant. This message strengthens your identity. It shapes your behavior. It teaches you that you are not a prisoner of mood or impulse. This is why physical training has such a transformative effect on emotional life. After effort, your mind becomes clearer. Thoughts become organized. Worries lose their sharpness. It is as if movement sweeps away the dust that accumulates on your mental surface. You rediscover calm not by thinking about calm, but by acting your way into it. The Stoics also believed that the body should be exposed to mild difficulties, not as punishment, but as preparation. Walking in colder weather without rushing, choosing stairs instead of elevators, or completing a task even when your muscles are tired, all these small challenges build inner resilience. When the body learns to withstand discomfort, the mind learns to remain stable under pressure. Another powerful effect emerges from physical effort: self-respect. Every time you follow through on a commitment to move, no matter how small, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of discipline. And discipline is contagious. When you take control of one part of your life, your mind naturally seeks to extend that control into other areas. Your habits, your decisions, your boundaries, your aspirations. Strengthening the body also means treating it with dignity. Sleeping adequately, eating with awareness, breathing deeply, and respecting your natural limits all contribute to mental clarity. You cannot expect your mind to operate with precision when your body is exhausted, neglected, or overloaded. Balance is not softness. It is strategy. What the Stoics knew, and what modern life keeps trying to ignore, is that a disciplined body becomes the foundation for a disciplined mind. When your physical state is stable, your emotions stop dominating you. When your energy is steady, your decisions become wiser. When your posture changes, your mindset changes with it. This practice is not about chasing perfection or achieving an ideal physique. It's about reclaiming your inner structure through the vessel you inhabit. Movement is not merely physical. It is psychological, emotional, and spiritual. It is a silent teacher that reminds you of your capacity, your strength, your direction. A strong life begins with a strong center. A strong center is built through a strong mind. And a strong mind depends on a body that supports it. Practice 3. Stop running from yourself and change your inner posture instead of your environment. Many people believe that the fastest way to improve their lives is to escape. Escape the city, escape the job, escape the noise, escape routines, escape relationships, escape responsibilities. They imagine that life will finally make sense once they stand somewhere else, surrounded by different faces, different streets, different opportunities. But the truth, the uncomfortable truth the Stoics never hesitated to say, is that you carry yourself wherever you go. And if you haven't organized what's inside you, every new place becomes a repetition of the old one. Changing environments without changing your inner posture creates the illusion of progress without any real transformation. You replace scenarios, but the same patterns follow you. The same reactions, the same habits, the same interpretations of events, the same insecurities, the same fears. A new location cannot correct what your mind continues to reproduce. You may change the landscape, but your internal scenery remains untouched. Stoicism teaches that peace is portable. Calm does not come from the conditions surrounding you, but from the way you interpret and respond to those conditions. A stable character does not depend on a perfect environment. In fact, many people have built meaningful, powerful, grounded lives in situations far from ideal. Not because they found the perfect place, but because they became the kind of person who remains intentional wherever they stand. Changing your inner posture begins with recognizing your patterns. Notice how quickly you attribute your frustration to the environment. This place drains me. These people hold me back. This job kills my inspiration. Sometimes these statements are true, but often they are excuses, convenient stories that protect you from confronting the real work you need to do. Escaping feels easier than reshaping the self. A more honest question is, what part of my reaction belongs to me, not to the environment? For most people, the answer is far more than they realize. Your inner posture consists of your interpretations, your emotional habits, your expectations, your impulses, and the level of discipline you bring to each moment. If these remain unstable, then nothing outside will feel stable. You will continue to experience life as something that happens to you, instead of something you participate in with intention. One of the most powerful Stoic exercises is to shift the question from "where should I go?" to "who should I become here?" This change in perspective reveals something essential. You don't need a perfect environment to begin the work. The right moment is rarely a matter of geography. It is a matter of alignment between your values and your behavior. Changing your inner posture means practicing presence. Instead of letting your mind escape into fantasies of elsewhere, you anchor yourself in the moment you are living. You observe your impulses without acting on them. You ask whether your thoughts reflect reality or simply old emotional habits. You examine your expectations and adjust them to something fair and grounded. This is internal discipline, and internal discipline is far more valuable than external comfort. It also means cultivating resilience. When something around you becomes inconvenient or uncomfortable, the immediate reaction is often to remove yourself. But the Stoics believe that difficulty is not a signal to flee, but an opportunity to strengthen who you are. Staying where you are for just a little longer, not out of resignation, but out of intention, teaches you to withstand discomfort without collapsing. This doesn't mean you must tolerate toxic situations or abandon the idea of change. It means you change with clarity instead of impulsivity. You move when the decision is rooted in strength, not escape. You choose a new path when you have already adjusted your internal posture, so the next chapter becomes different not because the location has changed, but because you have. When your inner posture stabilizes, something remarkable happens. The world stops feeling like a threat. You become less reactive. You gain emotional space. You begin responding instead of defending. You discover that peace is not a place, it is a capability. And once you develop that capability, every environment becomes less intimidating because you are no longer running from yourself. The Stoics believe that the greatest journey a person can take is the one inward, the journey of confronting the parts of themselves that they spent years avoiding. This journey is the true foundation of growth. Without it, every external change becomes temporary. With it, even imperfect conditions become opportunities for maturity. Your life begins to shift the moment you stop escaping and start facing yourself with honesty. And when that happens, the world no longer decides who you become. You do. Practice 4. Break the habits that quietly drain your strength. Most people imagine that their life is being held back by one big obstacle. A major failure, an unsolved problem, a missing opportunity, a painful memory. But for many, the real damage is done in smaller, quieter ways, through daily habits so familiar that they stop being noticed. These habits erode your discipline, weaken your clarity, and steal energy you never realized you were losing. And the worst part is that they often appear harmless, even comforting. The Stoics believe that freedom begins with self-governance, and self-governance begins with identifying the forces that control you more than you control them. Not all chains are visible. Some are disguised as routines, patterns, or impulses that you repeat without thinking. A habit can look small on the surface and still have the power to dictate the direction of your life. Breaking these draining habits requires honesty. The kind of honesty people avoid because it exposes their own participation in their suffering. It's easier to blame circumstances than to face the behaviors that slowly sabotage your potential. Yet without confronting them, you end up living below your capabilities, convinced that life is the problem when, in truth, your patterns are. One of the most dangerous draining habits is immediate distraction. Every time you reach for your phone when you feel bored, anxious, or slightly uncomfortable, you teach your mind that it never needs to endure unease. This rewires your attention until it becomes fragile. Instead of facing your thoughts, you escape them. Instead of building resilience, you soften it. Instead of acting with intention, you respond to impulses. Over time, distraction becomes not just a habit, but a refuge, a place where your potential quietly dissolves. Another habit that robs you of inner strength is emotional reactivity. When your mood controls your behavior, your life becomes unpredictable. You say things you regret. You make decisions that don't align with your values. You break your own commitments. The Stoics taught that emotions are natural, but they should never be rulers. The moment a feeling dictates your actions, your freedom diminishes. And the more often this happens, the more your mind becomes conditioned to surrender its authority. There is also the draining habit of constant postponing, telling yourself, not now, later, or when I feel like it. This self-deception creates the illusion of control, as if delaying something were the same as managing it. But postponing is simply another form of avoidance, and avoidance costs energy. Every unfinished task occupies mental space, every delay increases internal tension, and every moment of hesitation weakens your sense of capability. You begin to doubt yourself not because you are incapable, but because you witness your own inconsistency. A fourth subtle habit is seeking comfort excessively. Comfort is not the enemy, but dependence on comfort is. When you create a life that revolves around avoiding difficulty, your mind becomes fragile. You lose tolerance for challenge, uncertainty, or effort. The Stoics deliberately practiced mild discomfort to maintain internal strength. They understood that a mind that never meets resistance cannot develop resilience. Every time you choose effortless pleasure over meaningful effort, you surrender a bit more of your potential. Breaking these habits does not require punishment or radical discipline. It requires awareness and replacement. Instead of automatic distraction, you train presence, choosing to stay with your thoughts for a few moments before reaching for external stimulation. Instead of reacting impulsively, you practice the pause, a brief moment in which you ask yourself whether your response reflects your values or your mood. Instead of postponing tasks, you commit to the smallest possible action, a single step that breaks the cycle of avoidance. And instead of seeking comfort constantly, you allow yourself to face mild discomfort intentionally, reminding your mind that you are capable of more than convenience. As you break these draining habits, an interesting transformation occurs. Your energy returns. You feel lighter, more aware, more grounded. You begin to trust yourself again. Decisions feel clearer. Your emotional world becomes less chaotic. This happens because these habits, even though silent, were consuming resources your mind desperately needed. When they are removed, your inner landscape becomes more spacious. You cannot build a strong life while maintaining behaviors that quietly weaken you. Removing them creates room for discipline, clarity, and strength to grow. And that is what this practice is about, reclaiming the subtle power you've been losing without noticing. Practice 5. Learn to decide with clarity instead of impulse. Many people believe they are making conscious decisions when, na verdade, they are simply reacting. They respond to emotions, urges, fears, anxieties, assumptions, and momentary pressures, and only later realize that the choice was not truly theirs. It belonged to a feeling that passed, to a mood that shifted, or to a moment that no longer exists. A life built on impulse becomes a life filled with regret, because nothing impulsive is rooted in stability. The Stoics placed enormous value on clarity, the capacity to pause, observe, and choose according to reason rather than emotion. They understood that decisions taken in emotional storms almost always lead to consequences that outlive the emotion itself. No one makes their finest choices in moments of anger, exhaustion, panic, excitement, jealousy, or fear. Yet these are precisely the states in which most decisions are made. To decide with clarity, the first step is recognizing the emotional moment. Every intense feeling has a physical signature: tightening in the chest, quickened breath, tension in the shoulders, an urge to speak or act immediately. When you notice these signs, you know you are not in a state fit for decision-making. The mind becomes narrow, and narrow minds see only extremes: always, never, everything, nothing. Clarity cannot exist in a mind captured by absolutes. The Stoic strategy is simple: create distance. When a strong emotion arises, you give yourself a small gap between feeling and action. This pause doesn't need to be long. Sometimes a single minute is enough. Sometimes a silent breath restores your perspective. Sometimes stepping into another room or looking out a window is all you need. The pause is not weakness, it is command. It is your reminder that your emotions are not your masters. Once the emotional wave settles, you're able to see the situation more objectively. And from this more neutral place, you can apply the second principle. Evaluate the decision through the lens of long-term consequence. Ask yourself, if I make this choice today, will I stand by it tomorrow? Will it hold up next week, next month, next year? Impulses chase immediate relief. Clarity seeks sustainable direction. If a decision feels urgent but fragile, it is probably emotional. If it feels grounded even after hesitation, it is likely wise. The third stage of clear decision-making is understanding your patterns. Life becomes much easier when you know what typically derails your judgment. Some people make poor decisions when they feel lonely. Others collapse under stress. Others act out of a desire to impress or to avoid conflict. Others react impulsively whenever they feel ignored. These tendencies are not failures. They are data. They reveal precisely where your inner work needs attention. When you identify your emotional triggers, you gain better control over your choices. And when your triggers lose power, your life becomes calmer. The Stoics believed that self-knowledge is the beginning of self-mastery. You cannot direct a mind you do not understand. You cannot make wise choices if you repeat the same emotional patterns without noticing. The fourth principle is cultivating internal criteria. Most people decide based on external noise: what others think, what seems convenient, what feels good in the moment, what promises the quickest relief. But clear decisions are rooted in values, not impulses. You need a standard for yourself, a compass you can consult when everything else becomes confusing. When your choices align with your values, you gain consistency. When consistency grows, your life gains direction. The fifth principle is reflection. After you make a significant decision, you revisit it later and examine what worked, what didn't, and what you can learn. This kind of review trains your judgment. Over time, your mind becomes sharper, faster, more grounded. You start noticing patterns earlier. You avoid mistakes you used to repeat. You no longer step into the same emotional traps because you've studied them from the outside. When clarity becomes a habit, you begin to experience a different relationship with your own mind. You no longer fear being overwhelmed by emotions because you have learned to regulate them. You no longer fear making the wrong choice because you have developed a process for choosing. Life stops feeling chaotic. Even challenges become manageable because you know how to access calm before acting. This practice is not about suppressing emotions. The Stoics never advocated emotional numbness. They taught emotional discipline, the ability to feel deeply but act wisely. When you learn to separate feeling from decision, you gain a freedom that most people never experience. You become someone who moves with intention instead of reaction, with purpose instead of impulse, with stability instead of chaos. Decisions shape your path. Clarity shapes your decisions. And a life guided by clarity becomes a life guided by reason, strength, and inner stability. Practice 6. Act before motivation arrives. Replace endless planning with courageous execution. One of the greatest traps of modern life is the illusion of productivity. People believe they are moving forward because they are thinking, analyzing, preparing, researching, organizing, or imagining the perfect conditions. But progress does not come from thought alone. It comes from action, real, imperfect, tangible action. And many people, without noticing, spend years preparing for a life they never actually begin. Stoic philosophy warns us about this tendency. The Stoics saw excessive planning as a form of fear disguised as wisdom. When you plan endlessly, it feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels safe. But beneath that safety there is hesitation, insecurity, and a desire to avoid the discomfort of starting. Planning is comfortable because it carries no risk. Action exposes you. Action demands courage. Action delivers feedback. Action forces you to confront who you really are in practice, not only in theory. The first step to breaking this cycle is understanding that motivation is unreliable. If you wait to feel inspired, you will wait forever. Emotions fluctuate. Mood shifts. Enthusiasm can disappear without warning. Decisions based on motivation collapse quickly. The Stoics believed that discipline, not motivation, was the foundation of progress. Discipline is stable. Discipline remains when you're tired, uncertain, or uncomfortable. Discipline does not negotiate. To train this principle, you must begin with small execution. Pick one task that matters, reduce it to its simplest form, and start. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. When you act before you feel prepared, you teach your mind that movement is not dependent on comfort. And once the action begins, something important happens. Your resistance weakens. The task becomes far less intimidating than it was in your imagination. The emotional weight disappears because reality is always lighter than fear. The second idea is embracing the concept of imperfect progress. Many people delay projects because they want results that match their ideal vision. But excellence is the result of repetition, not perfection. You become skilled by doing the work consistently, not by imagining the perfect version of it. The Stoics valued improvement over perfection, growth over fantasy. When you allow yourself to be imperfect at the beginning, you unlock the ability to become excellent later. Another essential part of this practice is learning to differentiate between necessary planning and avoidance disguised as preparation. Necessary planning solves real problems. Avoidance planning avoids emotional discomfort. You can identify the difference by asking yourself a simple question. Am I planning because the task requires it, or because I'm afraid to begin? Your answer will reveal the truth immediately. You must also confront the habit of waiting for the right moment. The right moment does not exist. Life will never present conditions free of distraction, pressure, doubt, or inconvenience. People wait months for clarity, years for stability, decades for confidence, and the opportunity slips away while they wait. The Stoics believe that the present moment is not just an option. It is the only place where action is possible. Acting now is not impulsiveness. It is alignment with reality. Another powerful technique is committing to one decisive action per day. A single movement that, if completed, ensures the day was not wasted. When you accomplish one meaningful action daily, your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes, dreams, or intends. You start seeing yourself as someone who executes. This subtle shift changes everything. The moment your self-image transforms, your behavior follows. It's also important to understand how quickly momentum builds once you start. At first, a task feels heavy. But as soon as you take the first step, the next becomes easier. Momentum is a psychological force. When you move, even slowly, your mind becomes clearer and more energized. When you stagnate, everything becomes heavier. Action produces clarity. Inaction produces confusion. Movement generates strength. Hesitation drains it. Finally, acting before motivation arrives builds an internal authority that few people ever experience. You begin to trust yourself deeply because you no longer wait for external conditions to validate your choices. You no longer depend on emotion to start. You realize that your life is shaped by your willingness to do what must be done regardless of how you feel. This is what Stoic courage truly means. Not heroism, not grand gestures, but the quiet, consistent decision to move forward even when every part of you wants to delay. When you train this ability, your entire life begins to shift. You become reliable. You gain direction. You stop living as a spectator of your own intentions. You become the architect of your days instead of the victim of your moods. In Stoic terms, this practice makes you unconquerable, not because the world becomes easy, but because you become unafraid to begin. Before we continue, take a moment to support this message. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, And share in the comments something you've been struggling with internally, something that you want to change. Putting it into words is a powerful act of self-responsibility. Practice 7. Build inner worth instead of chasing external approval. One of the quietest forms of suffering in modern life is the constant need for validation. People tie their self-worth to reactions, opinions, and signals from the outside world. A compliment becomes fuel. A criticism becomes a wound. A small approval lifts their entire mood. A small disapproval destroys it. They live like emotional pendulums, moving back and forth according to how others perceive them. In this state, no amount of achievement feels solid, because the foundation behind it is unstable. The Stoics warned against basing identity on anything external. They believed that the person who depends on praise becomes a prisoner of praise, and the person who depends on acceptance becomes vulnerable to rejection. When your value is determined by others, you are never truly free. You live in response to the expectations you imagine people have about you, not in alignment with your own principles. To break this cycle, you must first recognize how approval-seeking operates within you. It can be subtle, adjusting your personality to fit in, hiding traits you fear might be judged, exaggerating strengths to appear impressive, avoiding decisions because you fear they may disappoint someone. These behaviors seem minor, but they slowly erode authenticity. You begin to lose sight of who you are when you are not being observed. The Stoic approach is to build a kind of value that exists independently of external reaction. Value that comes from character. Character is not shaped by applause. It is shaped by integrity, consistency, honesty, and the decisions you make when no one is watching. When your actions are aligned with your principles rather than your fears, your inner worth becomes stable. You no longer need the world to confirm what you already know. To develop this inner stability, start by examining your motivations. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I believe it is right, or because I want to be seen in a certain way? This question alone reveals how much of your behavior is driven by approval instead of authenticity. When you identify these moments, you gain the opportunity to act differently, to choose actions rooted in conviction rather than performance. The second step is learning to sit with criticism without collapsing. Not every criticism is accurate, but not every criticism is an attack either. Some reveal blind spots. Others simply reflect another person's preferences. The Stoic mindset does not reject criticism, but it also does not let it define identity. You evaluate it with reason, keep what is useful, and discard what is not. When you no longer absorb every negative opinion as a personal verdict, you develop emotional independence. Another essential practice is lowering your dependence on praise. Praise is pleasant, but it can be intoxicating. When you start craving it, you unconsciously begin to shape your behavior to attract it. This makes your actions artificial. You begin performing instead of living. Stoicism teaches that the only approval worth seeking is self-approval, the quiet recognition that you acted with integrity, even if no one noticed. You must also learn to validate your own progress. Many people refuse to acknowledge their growth until someone else points it out. They wait for permission to feel proud. But inner worth is built through personal recognition. Noticing your efforts, appreciating your improvements, and respecting your own discipline. When you honor your internal victories, you stop depending on external applause to feel deserving. Over time, this inner worth becomes a shield. It protects you from insecurity, social pressure, comparison, and the need to impress. You begin to move with a calm confidence, not because you believe you're above others, but because you finally understand that the only person you must satisfy at the end of the day is the one you meet in the mirror. From this place, your relationships also transform. You no longer cling to people out of fear of disapproval. You no longer alter yourself to become more likable. You no longer shrink to avoid judgment. You show up as you are, steady, grounded, sincere. And paradoxically, authenticity often attracts more respect than performance ever could. This practice is not about rejecting others or isolating yourself. It's about reclaiming ownership of your identity. When your value comes from within, the outside world loses the power to define you. Criticism stops feeling fatal. Praise stops feeling necessary. Comparison stops feeling relevant. You become guided by principle rather than perception. This is inner freedom, one of the highest forms of strength according to the Stoics. Because when approval no longer governs your choices, you finally begin to live the life that is truly yours. Practice 8. Abandon perfection and embrace the discipline of steady progress. One of the greatest barriers to transformation is not failure. It is the obsession with doing things perfectly. Many people remain stuck not because they lack potential, but because they refuse to begin anything that might reveal their imperfections. They wait for flawless conditions, flawless timing, flawless execution, and a flawless version of themselves. The result is predictable. Nothing happens. Nothing grows. Nothing changes. Life becomes a cycle of hesitation wrapped in sophisticated excuses. The Stoics saw perfectionism as a form of control disguised as high standards. It is not excellence. It is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of inadequacy, fear of disappointing others, fear of confronting your own limits. Perfectionism creates an inner life full of pressure and an outer life full of unfinished beginnings. You imagine what you could become, but never give yourself the chance to become it. Abandoning perfection begins with understanding the cost it brings. When you demand perfection from yourself, you become your own enemy. You criticize your small attempts, discard your early drafts, sabotage your own momentum, and punish yourself for being human. No one grows under that kind of hostility. Improvement requires generosity, the willingness to accept that you will be clumsy before you become skilled, uncertain before you become confident, inconsistent before you become disciplined. The Stoics believed that progress, not perfection, is the measure of a well-lived life. They valued daily improvement, however small, over the illusion of flawlessness. Growth is cumulative. One action today added to one action tomorrow eventually builds a structure stronger than anything perfectionism could ever produce. A person dedicated to progress becomes unstoppable because their identity is built on movement, not performance. To free yourself from perfectionism, start by simplifying your entry point. Choose the smallest version of the action you want to take and complete it without negotiation. When you allow yourself to begin imperfectly, you train your mind to value effort over appearance. This shift is powerful. A single imperfect action breaks the psychological barrier that has kept you paralyzed. Once you begin, momentum follows naturally. The second step is learning to tolerate the discomfort of not being instantly good at something. The modern world encourages immediate results, but real growth requires patience. The Stoics practiced endurance of discomfort as a way to strengthen their character. When you stay with the discomfort of being a beginner, you cultivate humility, resilience, and discipline, traits far more valuable than the illusion of perfection. Another important practice is focusing on process instead of outcomes. When you obsess over outcomes, you become anxious, reactive, and easily discouraged. When you commit to the process, you become consistent. You stop measuring your worth based on results and start measuring it based on effort. This mindset protects you from despair and strengthens your sense of agency. You must also learn to reinterpret mistakes. Most people see mistakes as evidence of failure. Stoicism sees them as evidence of participation. A person who makes mistakes is a person who is alive, engaged, learning, and growing. Errors are not signs that you should stop. They are signs that you have begun. And nothing can be improved until it exists in an imperfect form. Another crucial step is recognizing that perfection is often a distraction from deeper fears. Many people cling to perfectionism because the alternative, committing to something real, feels terrifying. If they never finish, they never need to see how good they truly are. If they never try fully, they never need to face the possibility of falling short. But avoiding reality does not protect you. It imprisons you in a life far smaller than the one you are capable of living. In Stoic terms, perfectionism is a surrender of freedom. It hands your life over to fear. Progress, on the other hand, is an act of courage. It is choosing to move when the path is uncertain. It is choosing to learn when you feel clumsy. It is choosing to act when doubt tells you to wait. Every small step becomes a declaration of independence from the expectations that once suffocated you. As you practice embracing progress, you will notice a shift in your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who could do things and begin seeing yourself as someone who does things. This shift builds self-trust. You start believing in your capacity because you witness it every day. You no longer need perfection to feel worthy. You need only consistency. And that is the true power of this practice. Progress turns hope into action, action into growth, and growth into transformation. Perfection promises everything but delivers nothing. Progress promises little but transforms everything. Practice 9. Seek voluntary challenges to build inner resilience. Most people assume that resilience is something you develop only after life hits you hard. After a crisis, a loss, a disappointment, or an unexpected change. They wait for adversity to arrive and hope they'll be strong enough when it does. But the Stoics believe the opposite. Strength must be trained before you need it, not after. A soldier does not prepare for war on the day the battle begins. A mind should not prepare for adversity only when it's already overwhelmed. Voluntary challenges were a pillar of Stoic training. They did not seek suffering for suffering's sake, but they exposed themselves to mild hardship to remain grounded and capable. They understood a fundamental truth. A person who avoids discomfort becomes fragile. A person who embraces it becomes resilient. In modern life, most hardship is psychological rather than physical. People struggle with uncertainty, comparison, overstimulation, emotional fatigue, and constant distraction. Avoiding discomfort only strengthens these forces. Facing discomfort weakens them. Voluntary challenge is a deliberate act of stepping into the tension you would normally escape, not to punish yourself, but to expand your capacity. One simple challenge is practicing intentional silence. Spend a few minutes without music, without movement, without entertainment, without reaching for your phone. In the beginning, the stillness feels uncomfortable because silence exposes the noise inside you. But that's precisely why it is powerful. Silence trains the mind to settle without depending on stimulation. You become less reactive, more observant, more anchored. Another challenge is embracing physical effort, even in small forms. Walking when driving is easier, taking a cold shower for a brief moment, doing a short workout when you feel unmotivated. These micro-challenges send a clear message to your brain. I do not avoid effort, I can face it. Over time, this rewires your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone capable, disciplined, and reliable. Not because you feel strong, but because you act like someone who is. A third challenge involves emotional confrontation, having the difficult conversation you've postponed, setting the boundary you've avoided, or expressing an uncomfortable truth with respect and firmness. These challenges build courage in a way nothing else can. Avoidance may feel safe in the moment, but it weakens you long-term. Facing difficulty strengthens the muscles of integrity, clarity, and self-respect. You can also create challenges around delayed gratification. Choose a pleasure you are accustomed to: sugar, apps, entertainment, unnecessary spending, and reduce or pause it intentionally. This trains your ability to manage impulses. You discover that desire is not a command, and comfort is not a necessity. The less you depend on your impulses, the more authority you gain over yourself. One of the most meaningful voluntary challenges is practicing discomfort through discipline. Waking up slightly earlier than usual, finishing what you started even when the excitement is gone, showing up consistently for something that matters. These challenges refine your character. Each time you follow through, even when it's inconvenient, you strengthen the internal structure that supports every other area of your life. The purpose of these challenges is not to create suffering, but to expand your capacity. When you regularly expose yourself to controlled discomfort, the uncontrolled discomfort of life becomes less intimidating. Stress decreases because your tolerance increases. Fear loses power because your courage grows. Chaos feels smaller because your inner world becomes larger. The Stoics believed that the person who avoids discomfort becomes a prisoner of it. The person who embraces discomfort becomes its master. Voluntary challenges transform difficulty from a threat into a teacher. You begin to understand that resilience is not a gift, it's a skill. It's a kind of quiet strength that builds itself slowly, through repeated acts of intention. And something remarkable happens once resilience becomes part of you. Life stops feeling like an unpredictable storm. Challenges stop feeling like personal attacks. You stop fearing what might come next. Because you know, deeply, that whatever arrives, you are not meeting it unprepared. That is the essence of this practice. Train before you're tested. Strengthen yourself before you're shaken. Become resilient before you need resilience. Practice 10. Release the weight of resentment through intentional forgiveness. Resentment is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry, yet one of the easiest to justify. People hold on to past wounds because they believe that letting go means accepting what happened, approving the behavior, or allowing the offender to escape responsibility. But forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with your own inner freedom. The Stoics understood that anger and resentment damage the one who carries them far more than the one who caused them. Resentment consumes mental space. It shapes your reactions, biases your decisions, and clouds your ability to perceive the present clearly. You may think you've moved on, but a small reminder, a word, a memory, an image, pulls you back into an emotional state you didn't choose. This is the true prison of resentment. It can be triggered by something outside your control, yet it affects your inner world profoundly. Forgiveness, in the Stoic perspective, is not an emotional impulse but a deliberate act of reclaiming your mind. It begins with recognizing that the past is beyond your influence. No amount of anger can rewrite it. No amount of bitterness can rearrange what already happened. Continuing to revisit an old wound is like reopening a scar every time it begins to heal. The Stoics urged people to focus on what is within their control, and the past is never in that category. The first step toward forgiveness is acknowledging the hurt without dramatizing it. Many people oscillate between denial and exaggeration. Denial suppresses the wound. Exaggeration inflates it. Stoic forgiveness is about clarity. Seeing the event as it was, not minimizing its impact but not allowing it to define your identity. You accept the reality, not as a judgment on your worth, but as a stage of your life you no longer need to carry. The second step is separating the event from your interpretation of it. Often, the emotional pain is not caused solely by what happened, but by the story you continue to tell yourself about it. This means I'm unworthy. This will ruin my future. This proves I can't trust anyone. These narratives deepen the wound long after the event is over. When you untangle the story from the reality, the emotional charge begins to weaken. The third step is making the conscious decision to let go, even if the feeling hasn't caught up yet. Forgiveness is not an emotion. It is a direction. At first, the mind may resist. It might cling to anger because anger feels powerful. But the Stoics taught that real power is measured by self-control, not emotional intensity. Choosing forgiveness weakens the grip the past has on you. You stop reacting to ghosts and start reclaiming your attention for the present. One of the most transformative aspects of forgiveness is understanding that holding hatred or resentment is an act of self-harm. The person who hurt you may not even remember the event. They may never apologize or acknowledge what they did. But every time you replay the moment, you are the one who suffers. You are the one reliving emotional pain. You are the one losing peace. The Stoics believed that no one should have that kind of power over your mind. Forgiveness also protects you from becoming the person you resent. When you hold anger for too long, you start to internalize the same traits you dislike in others. Bitterness becomes familiar. Suspicion becomes default. Defensiveness becomes instinctive. By releasing resentment, you prevent the wound from shaping your character. You choose who you become instead of allowing the past to sculpt you. Another important part of this practice is repetition. Forgiveness is not a single act but a continuous choice. Memories may return. Emotions may resurface. On those days, forgiveness becomes a reaffirmation. I choose not to carry this anymore. With each repetition, the emotional weight lessens. The memory loses intensity. You gradually detach from the pain, not by forgetting it, but by ceasing to feed it. Forgiveness does not erase boundaries. It does not mean inviting harmful people back into your life or pretending everything is the same. It means letting go internally so you can act externally with clarity rather than emotional residue. When you forgive, you gain the ability to respond wisely, with strength, with dignity, with self-respect. This practice is the final piece of inner reconstruction. You cannot build a peaceful life while dragging chains from the past. You cannot create emotional stability while carrying old battles into new environments. Forgiveness is the act of setting down what no longer belongs to your present identity. In the end, forgiveness is not a gift you offer to others. It is a liberation you grant yourself. It is the moment you stop allowing yesterday to control tomorrow. It is the reclaiming of your inner space. It is the courage to say, "This no longer has power over me." Throughout this journey, you've explored 10 practices designed to rebuild your life from the inside out. Not through dramatic external changes, but through the quiet, steady restructuring of your inner world. And now, as we reach the end, it becomes clear that every one of these practices is connected by a common thread. The recognition that your life is shaped far more by your inner state than by your outer circumstances. Most people believe that transformation begins when life finally becomes easier, when problems disappear, when opportunities appear, when circumstances align. But the Stoics understood that waiting for the world to change is waiting for a life that never arrives. Real transformation begins when you stop expecting the external world to save you and start taking responsibility for the only world you can truly govern, the one within you. You've learned to enter the present moment with clarity, to strengthen the body so the mind has a stable foundation, to build a mindset that does not depend on location, approval, comfort, or emotion. You've seen how internal discipline slowly reorganizes chaos, how voluntary challenges prepare you for adversity, how clarity replaces impulse, how progress replaces perfection, and how forgiveness frees you from the weight you were never meant to carry. These practices are not theoretical. They are lived. They are felt. They are built through repetition. Small, consistent actions that, day after day, reshape the way you think, perceive, and respond to life. Nothing changes overnight, but everything changes gradually when you commit to the process. Inner reconstruction is not glamorous. It happens in moments of silence, in choices no one celebrates, in efforts no one applauds, in decisions that feel personal rather than visible. But these invisible victories accumulate. Slowly, you begin to walk differently. You react differently. You think differently. You handle challenges without collapsing. You no longer live controlled by impulses, moods, fears, or old wounds. You become someone capable of navigating life with steadiness, someone whose peace is not borrowed from circumstances but constructed from within. This is what the Stoics sought, not perfection, not invulnerability, not emotionless detachment, but inner sovereignty, the ability to remain grounded regardless of what life brings. A person who possesses inner sovereignty is not free because the world is gentle. They are free because they have learned to master themselves in a world that is not. And now the responsibility passes to you. Not to live these practices perfectly, but to live them honestly. To return to them when you forget. To strengthen them when you feel weak. To apply them when life becomes confusing. These 10 practices are not rules. They are tools. They are not demands. They are guides. Use them intentionally, and they will not just repair your life, they will rebuild it in ways you could never imagine. Before we close, take a moment to acknowledge yourself. Not for watching this video, but for recognizing that your inner world matters enough to be rebuilt. Many people avoid this work their entire lives. You chose to face it, and that choice alone already sets you on a path most never walk. If you want these teachings to stay alive within you, if you want to reinforce what you've learned today, write this sentence in the comments. I choose to rebuild my life from the inside out. Write it not as a gesture to the algorithm, but as a promise to yourself, a step toward the person you intend to become. If this message resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs clarity and strength. And whenever you feel lost, discouraged, or disconnected from yourself, return to these practices. They will remind you of the truth the Stoics repeated for centuries. You don't need the world to change for you to be at peace. You need only to learn how to remain at peace while the world changes around you. We'll meet again in the next video. And until then, carry yourself with calm, purpose, and unwavering inner strength.